Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Online Learning with Miss Molina. So today we're going to be going over a presentation that has to deal with World War II because we will be starting our book Mañana, tomorrow. So at the end of this, I will show you what your assignment will look like. You are going to be completing a 3-2-1, which is 3 new things you learned about World War II, 2 things you found interesting, and a question that you still have. So obviously you can pause at any time during the video as you're writing. And let's get started. So if I can find the button. With this presentation, you're going to be introduced to events that happened in World War II and characters that not only played a major role in history, but also in our book. So, who was in World War II? Okay, so you had 2 groups fighting in the war. The Allies, which included the United States, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, China, France, Poland, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the Netherlands. And then you also had the Axis, which some of you would refer to as the bad guys, which included Nazi Germany, Japan, Italy, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Finland, Thailand, and whether you believe it or not, Iraq. The person who started off the war was Adolf Hitler, and Adolf Hitler actually was a soldier in the First World War. And he was such a powerful public speaker. He motivated an entire country to do the things that he needed done. He was also the man that Germany hoped would help fix their economic problems after World War I. And he was also elected to be the leader of Germany. So the people actually voted to put him in power. And he was the leader of the Nazi political party. And the reason it is a Nazi political party is just like in the US where we have Republicans and Democrats, the Nazi is a political party as well. And he definitely became an enemy of the Jewish people because he just wanted people to look just what he called the pure race, which was blonde, blue-eyed people. And he is also the person who initiated one of the worst events in history up until the point, which was the Holocaust. Now, several of you will probably asking yourself, why does Hitler have that funny mustache? Well, I can actually give you a very, very funny piece of information. When he was a soldier in the First War, and they started using gases to attack the soldiers that were in the ditches, he pulled his gas mask over his face, and he actually had a mustache. But because the mustache was so big, he couldn't get the mask to go over it, so he thought he was going to die. So after that happened, he actually took a razor and cut his mustache sides off to make sure that a gas mask would always fit over his face. Adolf Hitler, this is his family tree. This is where Hitler's at. He did have siblings. So whether you believe it or not, Hitler was a child. He was a cute baby with a nice little bowl haircut there. And then this is young Hitler. So this is Hitler in the First War as a soldier. He's in one of the pictures. I really don't know which one it is, because there's several guys with big mushy mustaches, or if these pictures were taken after, but he's in the pictures as a soldier who fought in the First World War. So these are some more. You can see him. He always spoke in huge crowds. If you focus on this picture, you can see that there are tons of people saluting him. And every chance that he took to speak, he motivated people by the way that he spoke. So, we always ask, why did World War II happen? Well, I can tell you because there was a lot of tension within Germany. They didn't really know what was going on with their country after World War One. And there were definitely unresolved issues from World War One. The other nations who fought during the World War blamed Germany for everything, so they wanted to punish Germany as best as they could. The effects of the Great Depression in America in the 1930s actually affected the entire world. People didn't have jobs, there weren't enough money. It was a really hard economic struggle. And unfortunately, because there was no money, that led to a lot of people being upset. And the reason Germany had such a strong economic turmoil was because the other countries wanted to make Germany pay thousands, millions of dollars for the damage that they had done during World War One, and they didn't have the money to do it. Because that was happening and people were upset they lost the First World War, there was a political vacuum. So people were clearing out all the politicians that were in power. And then in 1937, Japan actually invaded China because after World War One ended, all the countries got together and they had like a little powwow. So they sat down, and were having this conversation. And all the other countries actually ignored Japan, and that ticked them off. They weren't happy that they were being ignored during the peace discussions. And then in 1939, Germany actually invades Poland. And then unfortunately in 1941, Japan does bomb Pearl Harbor, which launched the U.S. into joining the war. So what happened during the war? Well, World War I actually ended in 1918. And then Adolf becomes the leader of the Nazi Party only 3 years later. The stock market in the U.S. crashes in 1929. The Germans elect the Nazis into power. So once again, we're talking about a political party. And that's who won the elections in 1930. And then in 1933, January, just like we do here, Hitler was voted Chancellor of Germany, which basically means he was voted President of Germany, which he then turned into a dictator. And then he didn't waste any time. On March 12th of that same year, he opened the first concentration camp near Berlin. And then in 1935, 2 years later, that's when he has all the German Jews stripped of their rights. So basically, you don't have any rights, we don't think you're people. And whether you believe it or not, in 1936, the Olympics were actually held in Berlin, Germany, even though there was such tension going on. And then in 1937, Hitler reveals to the world that he's been building up the military and he plans to go to war. And then in August of that year, 1938, he mobilizes his military. Kristallnacht happened in November 9th, and this was, we would almost say a hate crime now. German soldiers actually went to Jewish homes and shops and took people out of their homes and killed them and burned houses and shops down. So it was really a hate crime against the Jewish community. And then Britain, France, Australia, and New Zealand declare war on Germany in 1939. And then in October of that year, the Nazis actually began to euthanize the sick and disabled, which means they actually started killing people who they thought weren't good enough to fight, which unfortunately that led to it being sick and disabled and the elderly. And whether it's hard to believe, but Hitler actually had an assassination attempt in November 8th of 1939, but it failed. And then in April 9th of 1940, the Nazis invade the country of Denmark. of that same year of 1940, the Nazis bomb Britain, and they continue invading northern Africa. And then, unfortunately, in June of 1941, that's when the Nazi mass murder starts. So that's when they just started killing people. The Nazis ordered the Jews to start wearing the yellow stars, which is the Star of David, to show that they were Jews. And that's also when, in the concentration camp of Auschwitz, had the gas chambers. And then December 7th, Pearl Harbor is bombed. And then December 11th, Hitler declares war on us, the U.S. And then, unfortunately, whether most of us like to believe it or not, Japanese Americans were sent to concentration camps here in the U.S. There were no gas chambers, but we were so afraid as a country that we actually started rounding up Japanese Americans and sending them to these camps to try to protect ourselves. And then there was the fight between the Jews and the military in Warsaw Ghetto. And then June 6th is the Allied forces D-Day invasion. And then in May 7th, Germany surrenders. August, notice, several months later, is when Japan surrenders to the U.S. as well. So what was the Holocaust? It was one of the mass killings in the entire world. Here you can see it has like a little skeleton head. Those are concentration camps where people were sent to be killed. And these are flow charts that were actually, the Nuremberg was used to determine if you were Jewish or not. So during the Holocaust, there were 5.9 million Jews that were killed. You can go through and see that they also killed Jehovah's Witness, homosexual, disabled, Romani. And in Auschwitz, there were 1 million people killed. So these are the concentration camps and how many people were killed. And then notice that between 1933 and 1940, under 100,000 Jews were killed. But then in 1941, you had 1.1 million. And then in 1942, 2.7 million people were killed. And then you can see the decline in 1943 after the U.S. decided to intervene, where the numbers started going down. It's really hard to believe that someone hated a race so much that they actually killed people just because of the way that they looked. So these are a couple photos. These are actually personal belongings of Jews that were taken to the Auschwitz. These are dead bodies in the background. And people arriving to concentration camps. You can see that they're being dropped off and separated. Yes, you don't have to zoom in. These are bodies of children who were killed in the concentration camps. As you can see, they're very gaunt. You can see they didn't get fed. These are mass graves where people who were killed in the gas chambers were just thrown in, or their bodies were burned, so there would be no trace left. And yes, this is a massive grave full of bodies during the Holocaust. So, the story does have some historical events, but it does deal with a very harsh topic. Very quickly, I'm also going to show you what your World War II PowerPoint. It's 3 things that you learned about World War II, 2 things that you found interesting, and then a question that you still have about the war. Please feel free to email me with any question that you might have, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.